at quite a pace that individuals, organisations, and one could argue society are struggling to keep up with. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview at three levels, because these, I think, the levels that we need to consider. The first level is the context. What do we mean by new world? And what do we mean by the new world of work? Once we understand that context, then what does that mean for organisations? Primarily, and I know we'll have HR professionals within the audience, what does that mean for you as an HR professional, as a chief people officer or a head of L&D? What does that mean that you need to do and start to advise your C-suite on how to adjust and to compete in this new world of work? And then the final area we'll do, what does that mean for me as a leader? You know, whether you are in the HR profession, whether you are a functional leader, a C-suite leader, what does that mean for you as a leader and also for your leadership style to make sure that you can get the results that you're required to do within your task and your function? So the first area I want to look at is, what do we mean by leading in the new world? What is the new world? What is the context that we are operating in? Well, I would say that it's not just the new world, it is a new order, and it's a reality of today. And we are living in some of the most destructive times in history. Political uncertainty is around the world, no matter what your perspective are on politics, but it's certainly uncertain. And sadly, as we've been seeing over the last few weeks, conflicts continue to rage, and there seems to be no end to those outcomes. Cost of living is being impacted for many, and I think a lot of the people that we lead and that we work with are feeling that pain. And interesting, from COVID, what was called the Great Resignation has created great rebalance, or as some would say, the Great Reawakening. Things have changed and people realise that they can demand and are wanting different things out of life. The other element here is that there are 5 generations working within the workplace. And if you just think about that, that's a huge amount of diversity and variety, which is great, but it creates, I think, a challenge for many leaders in knowing how to adjust and to align to the different needs that individuals will have. And I think with all those changes and that confusion and uncertainty, that's creating a fragility and anxiety, which is being felt by many, whether you're a leader or not. And sadly, that's leading to a drop in engagement and an increase in burnout, which is something certainly when I work with senior leaders that they are talking into, which 18 months ago they may well not have. And of course, we can't forget the challenge and the changes that are happening around AI and what's becoming called 5.0, the age of augmentation. And I say that it's looming, it's sort of there with us, and we need to understand that very quickly. So the geopolitics, there is global instability, and it's really impacting everybody in some way. But sadly, it's something that is not in our control. But the ability to adapt here and for organizations and for leaders to adapt is key. And let's call it Darwinism. You know, and Darwinism isn't about the strongest, but it's about the most adaptable thriving. So how as organizations and how as leaders do we adapt and adjust to the new world of work? So let's look at what's creating that need to change and to adapt. Well, I talked about the Great Resignation, or the Big Quit, as it was called. Soon after COVID, people were departing. They realized that life could be different and they wanted different things. This is now turning into what people are calling the Great Rebalance. And what's rebalancing is the power. You know, the shift of power is moving from the employer to the employee. They realize that there is a balance, or should be a balance, of power. And therefore leaders are having to think about how they lead without that power, or with that authority, if you like, that command and control, which we will look at. And that's leading to the Great Reawakening. A lot of leaders, a lot of senior individuals are thinking about, what does life mean to me? What's the purpose of all of this? And we'll look at why that may be encouraged to take different steps forward as leaders or in the way that they do lead. The other thing which I mentioned, which I think is really important to understand, is the different levels of generations. And as I say, that diversity is great, but that brings on a different challenge for leaders and organizations, different policies that need to be adapting to the different requirements and demands that different generations will have. What a 25-year-old wants compared to what a 65-year-old wants are very different. And not only do organizations need to adjust to that, but we need to adjust our leadership style and our empathy and our lived experience to be able to connect and adapt to those different generations. And the generations won't stop. Generations keep coming, and we need those to fill the talent pipeline within our organizations. And interesting, the next generation is being called Generation Alpha. And those individuals are now starting to come into the workplace, into the university. And if people thought that Generation Z were difficult to understand and to manage and to lead, I think we're going to be in surprise when Generation Alpha starts to come into the workplace. And that's over the next 3 to 5 years. The other big change that is happening in the context is obviously AI and technology. And, that is the pace of change that happens, as we've seen from the age of the mechanized production to the age of mass production to where we are now, which is called the era of smart automation, leading over time and very quickly into the era of augmentation. And this brilliant article called Leadership Futures, Advancing the Industry 5.0 talks brilliantly into how organizations and leaders need to understand not just how to use AI, but how to balance it with human interaction along with machine interaction. And that is the new world. And I would say it's fair to say that many organizations, many leaders are struggling just at 3.0, let alone 4.0, and let alone 5.0. So as leaders, as organizations, as HR professionals, we need to be really clear about how we augment AI into the human interactions and the way that we lead. So in very simple terms, 5.0, the era of augmentation is here. It's going to require human machine collaboration and a combination of both AI and human. And there's some interesting research that's coming out that AI can beat a human on its own, but when you combine human and AI, it beats any AI system to be able to process and to be creative and empathetic in the way that a leader should be and is expected to lead. Now, all of these changes are leading to a confusion, an environment which used to be called in the old days, 1987, VUCA. I'm sure we've all heard of VUCA, that volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and it probably still feels like that. But a new term, post-COVID, has been adopted. And this talks about being brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. And certainly from my own perspective, there are days where I feel very much levels of anxiety, incomprehensible, confusion, brittle, close to burnout, all those different things, which I'm sure those that we lead and ourselves as leaders will start to feel. But the interesting thing here isn't about describing the world external. We need to accommodate and understand that. But what's needed is being able to adapt to the new world. And any level of adaptation needs change. And this is where the other element comes in and is quite concerning in not only the pace of change, but the energy or willingness to change. This is some interesting research from Gartner, which showed that the willingness, and I would say the ability to change or to support organization change is dropping and has dropped quite considerably. So since 2016 to 2024, we've seen a 41 reduction in the willingness to change. Another term for this is about the change fatigue. And if we're needing to adapt and change to a new world of work, but our willingness and ability to change is being reduced, then we've got, if you like, a perfect storm. So what's being created here, and the challenge that leaders are now facing, having to operate in that new world, is what's being classed as a transformation deficit. And notice the shifting language from change to transformation. I think a lot of organizations are changing, and we'll look at that in a moment about how they see change happening. But the challenge here is that we need leaders and those that we lead to transform. And transformation takes energy and it takes time. And this transformation that we need is not just upskilling, but also a shift in mindset. And that extra energy, not only to change, but also to transform, is creating huge amounts of fatigue, which, and we'll see shortly, is leading to burnout for leaders and for those that they lead. Now, the approach that a lot of senior leaders and organizations will take to change is that they will reduce headcount. And they can do that, right? Because AI is taking over. Well, we've not quite caught up with that augmentation. We need both. But what's happening in the world of work is what's being called the great flattening, which happened soon after COVID, taking people out to make people more empowered and take out authority and bureaucracy. Well, what that's meaning is that leaders don't only have just one job, they have two, and sometimes when I'm speaking to leaders, three jobs that are being expected to fulfill. And with any job of a leader, you'll have people to lead. So finding the time and energy to lead individuals is becoming a real challenge for many leaders in that. And consequently, no surprise, being able to find the energy to do that because they care and they're ambitious and they want to do well is leading to a mental overload, which in technical terms is called burnout. So we need to be very conscious of that. The sad thing is, and the reality of the new world of work in the change context is that it's immense, but it's not going to slow down. Today's change is only going to get faster tomorrow. Technology is only going to get faster tomorrow. So there needs to be a reality here from organizations and from leaders that actually change is here, and change is going to increase in the momentum and the speed of change. And sadly, change has no stop button. So we can't pause to rest. What we need to do is keep going and deliver. So that continuation of change, of transformation, of having to adapt, of new ways of working coming in, has an impact on people, on those that we lead. And for me, I'm a very simple man that has a very simple view of what leadership is. And the role of any leader is to get results with and through people. But if those people have change fatigue and transformation deficit and are burnt out, which research is showing, then it makes our leadership role extremely hard. And this is quite a frightening statistic, which from January 25, but released recently, January 2026, has found that 63% of people within the UK show symptoms of burnout, exhaustion and disengagement. And we'll look at that further because I think disengagement is also a critical element of stopping sustainable performance from happening in organizations and puts more demand on those that are trying to lead and trying to get the results. So as a leader and as a HR professional, you need to realize that burnout is no longer a fringe issue. It's a reality. And we need to consider how we create an organization that is not only fit for purpose, but also can continue to deliver sustainable performance. And if we are to deliver sustainable performance, then we need individuals that are contributing or thriving. They're growing. But my experience is that most people are not contributing or thriving, but simply trying to survive, just trying to get through the day. And if leadership is about getting results with and through people, and those people are just trying to survive, it's really hard to get individuals, teams, organizations to thrive and to perform. And this data is reflected not just in the UK, but also by Gallup in their recent State of the Global Workplace, which is a brilliant document if you've not read it. And within that, we talk about Europe being 13%, which is that thriving piece, highly engaged, 21% globally. But in the UK, and I should imagine most of our audience is from the UK, only 10% of UK workers are engaged. Just pause and think about that. Only 10% are engaged. Think about the impact that has on the organization. Think about the impact it has on individuals, and think about the impact that places on leaders who are trying to get results for those that are potentially not engaged. And when you start putting those numbers into a slightly different perspective, and this source is, I put the data from that report into ChatGPT using AI, thriving 10%, contributing 10 to 15, and the rest compliant, potentially quiet quitting, where they just want to get through, they're doing enough to get by, or surviving, where they may be stressed or burnt out. And when you look at that in a bar graph, it's quite scary. On the left-hand side are those that are surviving and compliant. On the right, those that are contributing or thriving. So in very simple terms, if you take these as averages and place those over your organization, it means that only 25% of leaders and individuals within an organization are either contributing or thriving, which places a huge amount of pressure on leaders to get that 25% to deliver. And obviously 75% on the left-hand side. Now, Gallup isn't the only organisation that sees this. There's also data reinforcing this perspective and the context of leadership within the new world of work by the UK Employment Survey 2025. One of the fascinating statistics that they identify is that poor management, poor leadership remains the #1 barrier to engagement. And I don't think it's poor management. I think it's the inability to have the time or the energy to manage or lead effectively. But also what's also interesting, as new leaders move up into new roles for the first time, only 80% of new managers get no form of leadership training whatsoever. So we're being asked to step up into a new leadership role, but we're not being supported or skilled within that way of doing it, which puts even more pressure on leaders in the new world. So what does this mean for organizations, and what does this mean for HR professionals, and I guess generally for senior leaders? The answer is very simple. It's a huge wake-up call. The water is getting hotter, and as a frog, we need to understand that is the case. And as a frog, we need to adapt rather than allow ourselves to get boiled. So realization that change is inevitable, it is happening and it is increasing. We need to understand and realize that AI integration will happen. It's not a nice to have, and it is accelerating at the pace that we need to do. So we can't just put our heads down. Adaptability is key. The fittest survive. Those that can adapt will survive. Classic Darwinism theory. And as part of that adaptability, it requires transformation, not just an upskilling in certain skills, but a different mindset, a different operating system required for the new world of work. And my argument here as we go through this is that coaching will become the new leadership form. And coaching is a skill set which needs to develop into a mindset which will allow leaders to maintain sustainable performance in the new world of work. Another Gartner report looked at the top 5 priorities for HR leaders, HR professionals. The first, #1, leader and management development. Having to adjust the way in which leaders and managers operate. Organizational culture, making the culture, the sort of systemic approaches fit for purpose for not only the new world of work, but for those entering the new workplace. strategic workplace planning, change management, and HR technology. And that's a global perspective, as you can see, from 1,400 HR leaders around their challenges and their focus. So when you look at this context, we do have a problem. And what's caused this problem is that the new world of work is here, and it's landed fast. And organizations, HR professionals, leaders have not been able to keep up. So I would suggest that leadership development is an area, as we've seen, is a core priority. Many leaders don't have the right skills, and they're certainly trying to tackle new challenges with an old world mindset. So both leaders and HR professionals are struggling to find the solution, to find what the answer is, to be able to continue to sustainably perform and to succeed in this new world. So what do we need to be doing around the leadership and management development to make sure that we've got leaders fit for the new world? Well, again, taking insight from others in their thinking. There's a great book called Competing in the New World of Work. I would highly recommend it. And within that, they identify 4 key areas that will be critical for leadership competencies to talk into. The ability to anticipate future events, that foresight to be able to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think a lot of leaders and organizations have not been able to do that. They've just thought that we would go back to the old world. Well, the old world is in the old world. It's a new world that we're now living in. The ability to be agile and adaptive, to quickly move. It needs people to be empowered to take ownership. I did a webinar recently on creating thinking followers. How do we create followers that think for themselves and will action things rather than being waited to told what to do? That's agility. The ability to adapt and recover quickly around adversity. We call it resilience. That's not making someone more resilient so we can give them more. That's making them sort of change ready and adaptable so that they can adjust and be resilient to the constant change that we're all facing. And leaders and organizations aren't going to do that alone. So how do we create greater levels of collaboration, not just within the organization, but with partners, with suppliers, with customers, so that we can succeed together? That requires a different mindset from leaders. That requires a different skill set in the way that we have conversations. So these are some of the skills. And again, from Gartner's perspective, their view is that there's also a human element to this. Yes, we are human beings, but a lot of the time leadership or management approaches are designed for human doings. It's quite transactional. It's very authoritative. The shift needs, certainly for the younger generation, it needs to be more human-centric, where leaders are authentic, they're empathetic, and they're adaptive. And that's what they're identifying as human leadership. And these competencies, again, are reinforced with Harvard. And we can see some common themes coming through here and some new themes emerging. So authenticity is there again. How do you lead strategically with more of that foresight, that longer term, more purposeful approach? How do you lead teams that deliver? Leadership is about getting results with and through people. Delivery, it's about outcomes. How do we develop others? And how do we help develop each other and support each other? Understanding the business, making sure that we use data and insight from AI and other tools cleverly, but combining that with leadership and team interaction. How do we use inclusivity and utilize that great diversity that the new world of work is bringing in? And again, we see the term resilience and agility coming through. And the ability to be change able, to realize and be comfortable with change, not push back against it, to embrace it and learn from it with a growth mindset. And how do leaders, communicate with influence and impact? So they take people with them, creating narratives that are inspiring, that are engaging in a challenging time. And again, this is from Josh Bershwin, developed in 2022. It's culture framework. You can see some very common themes starting to emerge across all these frameworks. But the support, how do you train managers and leaders as coaches? We'll see shortly some new research that's come through from Gallup about how do you go from being a boss to being a coach, a more supportive, collaborative, connective, human-centric way of leading rather than command and control. So one of the questions that I would ask HR professionals on the call and organizations, those that are in a place to influence the culture at a senior level, are your leadership competencies fit for the new world, or are they old world? Have you shifted your language and your mindset and come accepting to the changing environment and realize that, there's no better time than now to start making those changes and embracing that new world? But what does that mean for leaders? Because as leaders, we do need to change, and it's scary, and it's tough, and it's challenging. And again, from this book, which I highly recommend reading, Competing in the New World of Work, in there he uses this amazing quote that says, it's not about going back to work, which most, if not all of us did after COVID. It's about going forward to work. Because if we go back to work, we take our old ways into the new world. And those old ways are not fit for purpose. So we need to take new ways forward into the workplace. And that's a critical mindset shift that as HR professionals, senior leaders, as leaders, we need to make. But that forward to work is a big challenge. And I appreciate it's not easy. And it also requires personal transformation. And personal transformation requires energy. And as we've seen, there is transformation deficit and change fatigue. So the challenges we face are very real, but also very tough. And the new expectations that those that we lead have of us have also changed. You can see from the past to the future. It was in the past about my paycheck. Now it's about my purpose. If you're not purposeful as an organization, then, I may not join, or I may choose to take my effort and discretionary effort elsewhere. And the other things here is, it's not about an annual review. It's about ongoing conversations. It's not about a job. It's about my life, a work-life balance. That's the choice that I'm starting to make. And I don't see you as my boss with authority. I see you as my coach. How are you there to serve me? How are you there to help me play my best game? Which, if I want to, I can take my best game and my talents elsewhere. So the mindset shift and the challenge we face as leaders is an interesting one. It's moving from my boss to my coach, but it's also moving from leadership management to leadership coaching. And let me explain what I mean by that shift, because for me, this is a critical shift. Leaders today, and we still use this language, see themselves as line managers. They're a line manager. They have a reporting line coming into them. Just listen to that language, even in itself is quite authoritative. So we have leaders, managers, and our coaching hats, and we need to wear all three hats. We wear our leadership hat to articulate a game worth playing. What are you asking me to do, and why do you want me to do it? It's the what and why. It's the vision. It's the mission. It's the strategy. It's the direction. And I need to buy into that, and I need to feel engaged and inspired. As a manager, it's about me setting the rules and boundaries, the policies, the processes, the standards, the targets. That's my role as a manager. But then my role as a coach is to help you play my best game, or your best game, and help you deliver. And what all three are trying to deliver is around performance. And the game that we're asking individuals to play is performance. But the game's changed, and the environment and the arena in which we're playing has become even harder. And this is where real leaders will show up and stand up to be able to deliver that performance in challenging environments. It's a hard game to play, but we've got to win it. But I always think that it's not just about performance now. or short-term performance. What we need to be doing in the new world of work is think about how do we lead, manage, and coach to enable sustainable performance. Because if we continue to lead and manage in the way we are with the old tools and the old ways, that performance is not sustainable, as the increase of burnout and the decrease in engagement is showing. So how, as leaders in the new world, do we create sustainable performance? Not just for individuals, but for the organization, and some might argue for the planet as well. You know, what's called the triple bottom line: people, profit, and planet. And I see these three hats as a three-legged stool, because it's not just about coaching. And I'm not saying to you you need to just put a coaching hat on. What we need to be doing, and leaders need to understand, is how to use the leadership hat, the management hat, and the coaching hat in equal measure and within equal skill sets. Because our own research shows that when we ask individual line managers what hat do they wear most, what they tell us is that they wear their management hat 80% of the time to get that sustainable performance. That's the hat they're most comfortable with. That's the hat that they use. And what's interesting with that is that if we're using that hat 80% of the time, then, and we're trying to achieve the game by rules and boundaries and policy and process, we are using our power, our authority, to achieve that game with the individuals. So 80% of the time, we are disempowering individuals. Now, we need individuals to succeed. It's about getting results with and through people. So if we are disempowering people 80% of the time, as leaders, we are making our job very, very hard for ourselves. And this side of the sort of the power line, I call leadership management. And for me, that is still the language and the mindset that many organizations lead from. They lead in a management style. And for me, that's the old way. What we need to be doing is thinking about how do we make that shift from leadership management to leadership coaching the new way. And it's not just saying you just need to put your coaching hat on, although the coaching hat should become the default rather than management hat. It's about knowing which hat to wear when. But primarily doing that through a coaching hat filter, because then you'll see identify opportunities to have more connected and collaborative conversations, which will inspire and to create movement and for people to execute on the game that you want them to play. So I very much see the shift in the new world of work for leaders is moving from one of a mindset of command and control, where authority will not work, to one of being connected and collaborative and knowing when to use your authority and power and manage accordingly, not just having it as your common default setting. So by doing that and creating a balance and shifting that default setting to coaching rather than management, you create a much better approach that is more sustainable, not just for those that you lead, but for you as a leader as well. You create an environment where people will do the thinking for you rather than you having to do the thinking for them and putting pressure on yourself constantly. It's just not sustainable. And that's why we created our leader as a coach. It specifically talks into that challenge and helps to develop that leader as a coach approach, understanding how to lead and how to manage, but primarily developing the skill set around coaching as a leadership style. So in very simple terms, we need to go from leaders from command and control to a more connected and collaborative way of operating, from leadership management to leadership coaching, and embracing moving away from seeing humans as human doings, as a resource, to being as a human being and engaging with them in a more purposeful, empathetic, and authentic way. And I love this quote from Professor Nick Kemsley. He said, we need leaders to actually stand up and say, I'm not part of the old system. I'm part of the new system. Or I'm reimagining a new system and want to start moving towards that new system. And that's why, for me, the whole organization construct is up for grabs right now. And it's a powerful time. And he's absolutely right. It is a powerful time, but it's a time where we need to start moving towards the new world, because it's not going to slow up. And the longer we leave it, the more impact, negative impact, that may well have on those individuals that we are leading. So as a leader, ask yourself these questions. Am I part of the old or new system? And have I, or am I, going back or forward to work? Because in the new world of leadership, work will need a new mindset and identity shift. It's not just about a skill set, it's a mindset. It's a new operating system that leaders, organizations need to develop if they are to continue to perform and to survive in the new world of work. And in that new world of work, just to quickly summarize, AI will need to be embraced and integrated. Don't shy away from it. Hybrid and virtual ways of working are the norm. Get used to it and learn how to lead in those. You'll need to accommodate the new generations that are coming into and are in the workplace. The power has shifted. Your level of authority and power that you have over employees is changed. And people, the psychological contract has changed. More is being required from less. So you've got to find new ways of operating, working in a more connected and collaborative way to get people to think for themselves rather than you do the thinking for them. You need to be very mindful that employment engagement is dropping and find ways of increasing engagement and supporting people of hopefully sort of stopping burnout or silent cracking from happening, and those that are, to help them back to recover so they can move to a place of contributing or thriving. And it's not that I may need to change to become a new leader. A new leadership style is being demanded, not just by the situation, but by those that you lead. And if you're unable to step up and provide that new style of leadership, then there will be consequences of that. So in summary, the pace and impact of change are phenomenal. It's a perfect storm, but it shows no sign of slowing down, and it will not slow down. People, leaders, organizations find them challenged as never before. And it's critical that as leaders, as organizations, transition through and adapt to these new changes. There is no change button. Leadership development, developing your leaders, must be your number one priority. And I believe that coaching will play a key part in that approach and will help to create a sustainable performance and new ways of operating. And that's why I'm proud to say that we provide a program perfectly fitted to that, to help leaders step up and to understand how they can use a coaching approach in their leadership style to address all of those pain points and challenges that we face.